Hello everyone, welcome to History and Culture. When watching Chinese period dramas or reading historical books, one might learn that the Imperial Palace is vast, where even a full day's walk may not cover it all. For instance, the Beijing Forbidden City covers over 1 million square meters and has around 9,000 ancient buildings, making it the largest and best-preserved ancient palace complex in China. The Forbidden City was originally the Imperial Palace during the Ming and Qing dynasties, built in the 18th year of the Yongle era, 1420. Throughout the Ming and Qing dynasties, 24 emperors lived here. According to ancient Chinese astrology, the Ziwei star, North Star, is positioned in the center of the sky and is regarded as the residence of the heavenly emperor. Thus, the Forbidden City is also called the Ziwei City. After seizing the throne, the Ming dynasty's third emperor, Zhu Di, decided to move the capital to Beijing. Beginning in the fourth year of the Yongle era, 1406. He used the Nanjing Palace as a blueprint to construct new palaces and city walls. Zhu Di first sent people to various regions to extract precious wood and stone, transporting these materials to Beijing. The resources collected included Nanmu from Sichuan, Danbi stone from Fangshan, gold bricks from Suzhou, and tribute bricks from Linqing. After years of effort, the Forbidden City was finally completed in the 18th year of the Yongle era, 1420. The palace was also a place of considerable authority, governed by numerous rules. Everyone, from the emperor to the concubines and down to the palace maids and eunuchs, had to strictly adhere to these regulations. Only certain high-ranking palace maids and eunuchs could attend to the concubines. Generally, the maids closest to the concubines were those who came with them as personal attendants, and they tended to distrust other palace maids. Historical records indicate that only high-ranking concubines had eunuchs. Not every concubine did. For those concubines relegated to the cold palace, they had no eunuchs or even maids and servants, living a miserable life, enduring years in isolation. Additionally, in modern Qing dynasty historical dramas, we often see concubines wearing long dresses that resemble kipayos. However, contemporary kipayos are more fitted and beautiful, while ancient kipayos were quite loose and comfortable, allowing for additional layers underneath. The shoes they wore resembled platforms, which are impractical today due to their high and wide heels. In ancient times, modesty was paramount. So aside from their faces and hands, concubines could not reveal any other parts of their bodies. As a result, both concubines and palace maids dressed very conservatively. With long garments and high, bulky shoes, walking became quite inconvenient, and one could easily trip. Consequently, some actresses struggle to walk in such shoes during costume dramas and might fall when they first wear them. However, after some practice, they adapt. Thus, when they appear in public, some concubines are assisted by palace maids. Moreover, we see some concubines being carried in sedan chairs, which are essentially elaborately decorated wooden chairs. If a concubine prefers not to walk, eunuchs will carry her. It's worth noting that fans of Chinese period dramas may have observed an unusual practice. When a concubine returns from spending the night with the emperor, especially the next morning, she often requires assistance from palace maids to get out of bed. The true reason behind this can be difficult to discuss. According to relevant historians, there are three main reasons for this. The first reason is that the concubines are of high status. They come from backgrounds that are typically superior to those of palace maids. Some concubines are quite proud, taking advantage of their status, which leads them to act recklessly and treat palace maids and eunuchs with disdain. However, such arrogant concubines often meet unfortunate ends. For instance, the characters of Gao Guifei and Hua Fei in some historical dramas are depicted as proud and flamboyant, ultimately facing tragic fates. The second reason is the influence of the feudal system in ancient times. Around the age of 10, girls were required to have their feet bound, a practice heavily influenced by superstitions stemming from feudal beliefs. According to relevant historians, foot binding, also known as lotus feet, was a special custom directed at women in Chinese history. Its origins can be traced back to the Tang dynasty, but it truly became popular during the Song dynasty. Initially, foot binding was a tradition among wealthy families, as only girls from well-off households had the opportunity and conditions to undergo this practice. Over time, the scope of foot binding gradually expanded, with more and more women starting to bind their feet. The primary reason for foot binding was closely related to the aesthetic values of the time, where women were viewed as extensions of the family, needing to embody characteristics such as delicacy, obedience, and graceful stature. Foot binding was believed to enhance a woman's gait, making it more elegant and lithe, thus seen as a symbol of feminine beauty. However, the process of foot binding was extremely painful, and many women were unwilling to do it but felt powerless to resist. As a result, they resigned themselves to their fate. After their feet were bound, these women often walked unsteadily, necessitating assistance from maids. Later, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a series of reform movements erupted in China, including movements against foot binding. These movements called for the abolition of this traditional practice and advocated for women's equal rights and freedoms. Thanks to these efforts, foot binding gradually decreased, and by the 1930s, it had almost disappeared. Thus, foot binding represents a painful chapter in the lives of women at that time, evoking a deep sense of sorrow. The third reason is the lack of strength, especially after being favored by the emperor, leaving them feeling sore all over. Therefore, when they got up, they would first be assisted by a few maids to dress and groom themselves before paying respects to the empress or visiting other palaces. Some consorts, holding high status, also dressed beautifully, adorning themselves with heavy decorations to reflect their status. The weight of these adornments made them fearful of them falling off while walking, leading them to be assisted by maids to avoid falling. This group of consorts often displayed a certain flamboyance that made other consorts feel dissatisfied. As some historians have commented, although this group of consorts appeared to live in a luxurious palace, enjoying power and status, their fate was also filled with misfortune. Despite enjoying the emperor's favor and the extravagance of the palace, they often faced endless competition and jealousy. To vie for attention, they had to endure physical and psychological pressure, living in a state of anxiety and insecurity. Thus, the women in ancient palaces, whether consorts or maids, despite their seemingly glamorous lives, often felt lonely and helpless inside. Their stories weave a narrative of power, jealousy, and sorrow that provokes deep reflection. This is the History and Culture channel. Liking and subscribing are the greatest help and support to us. Thank you everyone and see you in the next time.